This video asks a number of questions. Is economic growth inevitable? If you're rich, do you stay rich? If you're poor, how do you become rich? Let's look at some history to find out. Very famously, since the 1960s, we've seen a handful of Eastern Asian countries go from relatively poor, GDP per capita was all less than $10,000 a year in modern dollars, to today becoming prosperous and wealthy. These have been given the nickname the Asian Tigers, and includes Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, Taiwan. Singapore has been the most dramatic. Their current GDP per capita is even slightly larger than the US at $67,000 a year in 2022. But note, growth cannot last forever. Hong Kong's GDP per capita peaked in 2018 and is yet to recover. This coincides with a large mainland Chinese institutional takeover of their judicial system. There is a worry that the previous institutional successes of protection of private property rights, fair and free and transparent trials under the law, may be compromised, and therefore there will be less investment into Hong Kong and a slowdown in GDP per capita. We have also seen enormous successes of the world's newer superpowers. India's GDP per capita went from around $300 in 1960 to $2,000 today. China likewise has seen serious economic progress. Their GDP per capita today is $11,000 a year. But not every country sees sustained long-run economic success. Iran, for example, had its highest GDP per capita back in the late 1970s, just before their revolution. The 1980s was characterized by a prolonged war with their neighbor Iraq. And while there has been progress since the 1990s, they have yet to catch up to the economic prosperity they had 50 years earlier. Next, Brazil has failed to recover from the global financial crisis of 2009. Their GDP per capita peaked in 2013 and has yet to recover. And it's not just developing countries. A rich country like Italy saw their GDP per capita peak in 2007. Economic prosperity is not inevitable. We have to create and guard inclusive institutions. We need all to have access to a free and fair rule of law, a transparent and speedy court system, and a government that invests in public goods that benefit everyone rather than simply enriching the few. This example is quite striking. Both Nicaragua and El Salvador experienced severe political instability with a civil war and coup in the late 1970s. The war carried on for years, drastically harming the economic prosperity of the citizens. By the early 90s, the conflicts finished, and we see an economic recovery. However, El Salvador's economic recovery has been substantial. Today, they are more prosperous than they've ever been, whereas Nicaragua, unfortunately, has failed to return to a 1970s level economy. Solo's prediction of the catch-up effect has not been universal. While some countries, such as South Korea, went from poverty to prosperity in the course of a half a century, others have not. However, individual purchasing power can still get the same quality of life anywhere. The real difference between countries is how many are in poverty. For example, if you are wealthy living in Nicaragua, you will have a similar standard of living if you are wealthy living in the United States. Numbers on a line are informative, but reducing the economic experience to a statistical data point on a graph sometimes isn't enough to help our human understanding. So this website here called Dollar Street has gone all over the world and compared different standards of living in different countries. I think what you'll find is the common humanity in all of us. And no matter what country you live in, lower incomes have a similar standard of living. Middle incomes have a similar standard of living. And the wealthy across the globe likewise live in a similar economic lifestyle. Specifically looking at houses, at a living of $40 a month in Kenya, or $40 a month in Haiti, or $31 a month in India, the household structure is similar. Once an income is at $200 a month in the Philippines, or $200 a month in Serbia, or $160 a month in Tanzania, there is structural improvement. And then at $500 a month in Jordan, we have apartments, similar in Ukraine at $700 a month, likewise Nigeria or Colombia have similar household structures. And finally, the very wealthy, $7,000 a month in Spain, $4,000 a month in Brazil, or $6,000 a month in Mexico, we see a similar standard of living. When we look at sleeping arrangements, such as beds, families who are living on less than $100 a month largely have a similar style. During the day, the bedding is sometimes put in a corner, such as Cambodia. The bed structure itself may or may not have a formal mattress. But once a family starts to earn $1,000 a month in Cameroon, Tanzania, Guatemala, or Palestine, we have a mattress, we have a bed cover, we have pillows, we often have a backboard. And then when you're making more than $1,000 a month, you get a private room with other furniture. The beds become larger. And notice, just by looking at these beds, you can't tell what country they're from. A bedroom in South Korea looks like a bedroom in Brazil, looks like a bedroom in Sweden, looks like a bedroom in Nigeria. We see similar patterns of standards of living looking at families making less than $100 a month. The families living in the household are often larger. The household structures are more temporary. For the more middle income, making less than $1,000 a month, now we have permanent structures. In South Africa, we have a larger multi-generational family at this level. In the US, we have a single mother. And finally, for the relatively globally affluent, we see a common prosperity across the world. In China, the family owns 2 cars, the clothes are fresh, clean, and new, and everyone is affording expensive dental work. A household income makes a difference. And what we have found in the economic research is that it's not culture, taste, and preferences that cause economic inequality. It is the policy choices, economic institutions, and economic structures at the macroeconomy that make the difference. So I started off this chapter by saying it's the number one most important. I hope as we've gone through that, we see why. Of all the things we do in this semester, the number one thing that can alleviate the most suffering, bring the most freedom, bring the most prosperity, yield the most happiness, are the things that preserve long-run economic sustainable growth.